So far, her great accomplishment has been to, well, and also she has, well, one thing she did was, well, she goes on national TV. She says things are getting better at the border without evidence that anything's getting better at the border. So there's new polling. And what does it show? It shows that Joe Biden has not won any additional support since the election. Now, you could say, well, Joe Biden had a good level of support in the election, right? I mean, he won 7 million more votes than his opponent. He won about 52% of the vote. But normally, when presidents enter office, when they first win, especially after a very, very polarizing era, they enter with these very high approval ratings. And if they get a lot done over the first 100 days, those approval ratings tend to rise. And this happened with Barack Obama. He entered office. He won. He won something like 53 to 45. And then his approval ratings shot up into the 70s at the very beginning of his presidency. And then pretty quickly, they started to come down as people realized that what they were promised, namely a unifying figure who was post-political and also post-racial, was lying to them during the campaign. And you saw Barack Obama's numbers start to take a nosedive. So he ended up in the low 50s for most of his presidency. And that, again, was largely attributable to the fact that he was a very popular person, even though his policies weren't particularly popular, as evidenced by the fact that he lost Congress 2 years in. Well, Joe Biden is not nearly as personally popular as Barack Obama was. He's not charming. He's not charismatic. He's an old fuddy-duddy who can barely string together a sentence and has been in Washington since well before I was born. He also happens to have some corruption problems, and he's, again, unable to coherently speak. Right? So he doesn't have any of the personal qualities that made Barack Obama very popular, particularly with independents. But he does have the same thing that Obama did, which is the promise on which he gained office has now been discarded. The promise was return to normalcy, we're going back to normal. And then he came in and he's like, what if I spend $10 trillion? $10 trillion. What if I just do that? And talk about raising the capital gains tax radically. And talk about raising income tax rates. And talk about regulating everything under the sun via climate change rules. What if I do all that? And the American people are like, you know what? I don't like this. I don't like this. Republicans heading into 2022 have to be very optimistic about their chances. Because here's the thing. It ain't going to get better for Joe Biden from here. Joe Biden's height of popularity is when he took office and his first 100 days. That's when he's going to get the height of his popularity. Americans already got their stimmy checks. So that's it for that. Americans are not going to like the costs that are associated with what Joe Biden has been pushing on the country. And that's why right now, again, his poll numbers are not stellar. They're quite mediocre, in fact. And the media are trying to cover up for that fact that they're quite mediocre by saying that he has mostly positive marks. But the question is not whether he has mostly positive marks. The question is, where is he relative to other presidents not named Donald Trump at this time? So in just 1 second, we're going to get to the latest polling data from Washington Post ABC, which shows that Joe Biden is not a particularly popular president. And this is going to have some pretty significant downstream effects for Democrats who are running for Congress, running for Senate in 2022, particularly in purple states like Georgia. Okay, so here are some of these poll stats. According to the Washington Post, 52% of adults say they approve of the job Biden is doing, compared with 42% who disapprove. That's not a shock, because again, he won about 52% of the vote. Nobody who voted for Joe Biden is turning around and going, oh, I hate that guy now. But he has not picked up a single percentage point of support from the rest. And that's kind of shocking. Because again, what polls tend to show, people, self-reported polls particularly, tend to show that if you ask people who they voted for after an election, they tend to say more often than they actually voted for the person who won. So normally, in a normal circumstance, if you ask people, how many of you voted for Joe Biden and Biden won, you get 60% of people saying they voted for Biden, even though only 52% of people actually voted for Biden. Well, right now, his approval rating mirrors precisely his actual voter percentage. On the one hand, you can say, well, that's solid. I mean, it's consistent. And that's true. It is solid and consistent. Solid and consistent at a bare majority, which means there's a lot of room for Joe Biden to slide and pretty much no room for him to grow. He now has a ceiling. His ceiling is about 52%. He has no place to go but down from here. And as the effects of these world-breaking policies are felt, it's going to go down from here. At this point in his presidency 4 years ago, Trump's rating was 42%, disapproval at 53%, which again was not a particular shock because he only won 46% of the vote in 2016. Overall, 34% of Americans say they strongly approve of Biden's performance. 35% say they strongly disapprove of Biden's performance. Okay, so he is running basically just dead even. This, by the way, includes the fact that he has huge marks for his handling of COVID. Or again, I struggle to see how Joe Biden is going to gain from here. He's emerging from an economic depression. There's going to be a booming economy for the next year. Everybody knows that the stock market is going bonkers. And people are going back to their regular lives after they get vaccinated, and he's getting credit for that, even though he didn't do a damn thing about it. I mean, that's a pretty good position to be sitting in. Normally, in a vacuum, you say, okay, you got a president with an economy that's about to boom at like 8%. You have a vaccine that has been tranched out at the rate of 3 million a day to Americans, and people going back to work. You have people going back to their regular lives. Shouldn't that president be at like 75% approval rating? That ain't happening. And the reason that ain't happening is because this dude is a partisan hack. And he is demonstrating that he is more Bernie Sanders than Scoop Jackson. He is not an old-fashioned moderate Democrat. He ain't Joe Manchin. He's closer to AOC than he is to a blue dog Democrat. 53% of Americans say they disapprove of the way he has dealt with the immigration situation at the U.S.-Mexico border, which, by the way, does not include AOC. Right? Worthy of note. The people who approve Biden the most right now are people like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Remember that time that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez got so upset with Donald Trump's immigration policy and the kids at the cages that she actually went down to the border in Texas and she put on a white outfit? It was all very spontaneous. She spontaneously decided to put on a white outfit and then go stand outside of an empty chain link fence and then stare across a parking lot. And she could maybe distantly see a facility where there are kids being held in cages and then stare directly into camera and weep. Remember this? Very spontaneous outburst of emotion. Well, now here's AOC's spontaneous outburst of emotion, a multiple of kids being held in cages. But, Joe Biden's doing a wonderful job. Almost as though the Democratic Party does not give a damn about the kids in the cages. They only care about who's in power.
I do think that the Biden administration and President Biden has definitely exceeded expectations that progressives had. I'll be frank. I think a lot of us expected a much more conservative administration. And I think that his, not only what has ultimately come out, but the active invitation and willingness and collaboration with progressives in his first 100 days, or almost 100 days, has been very impressive.
So I take it no weepy photo ops at the border then? None of that. Interesting. By the way, Kamala Harris, who is actually put in charge of the border situation, so far her great accomplishment has been to, and also she has, one thing she did was, she goes on national TV, she says things are getting better at the border without evidence that anything's getting better at the border.
In addition to meeting again with the president of Guatemala, I will be meeting the following day with the community-based organizations in Guatemala. They call them basically civil society, to figure out how we can better assist what they're doing on the ground in a way, again, that they can give the resources to people who naturally want to stay at home and give them some sense of hope that help is on the way. This is the work that we're doing, but it's not going to be solved overnight. It's a complex issue. Listen, if this were easy, it would have been handled years ago.
Okay, there's only one. Whenever she has to say the hard part, that's when she starts laughing like a crazy person. So I've noticed they haven't solved that problem, and the American people have noticed this as well. 53% of Americans, according to, again, this Washington Post ABC News poll, say that they don't like the way that he's dealing with the border. His approval rating for the economy stands at 52%. Now, normally, when you have a booming economy like you're about to get, it should be in the 70s. He's at 52%. And by the way, if you look at it by the Democrat, Independent, Republican breakdown, what you notice is that he's underwater with independents. He's at 47% with independents. He's at 90% with Democrats, which is why overall he's at 52%. But he's at 47% with independents. He is at 47% on the economy. He's at 32% on immigration. Although his first sizable initiatives enjoy majority support, the poll also finds that by 2-1, Americans say that Biden should be willing to make major changes to his proposals to win Republican support. In other words, the American people keep saying, we elected you to be a moderate, and you are not being a moderate. Also, 53% of Americans say they are either very or somewhat concerned that Biden will do too much to increase the size and role of government. You think? You think he's going to spend $10 trillion? That's his proposed spending this year. Okay, this is, again, these are not great numbers for Joe Biden. These are not stellar numbers for Joe Biden. In fact, these are the worst numbers except for Donald Trump of any modern American president at this point in time. It literally buried down in this Washington Post article is the admission that Biden wins positive ratings ahead of his 100th day, better than Trump, worse than every other president since Eisenhower. At this point in time, Obama was at 69%, GW was at 63%, Bill Clinton was at 59%, HW was at 71%, Reagan was at 73%, Carter was at 63%. The only person who has a lower rating, and it's not net, right? Only just in absolute terms, was Gerald Ford, but even he had a plus 16 rating. Biden's at plus 10. But normally, presidents are at like plus 40, plus 30, plus 20, plus 50. If you go all the way back to like Eisenhower, Kennedy, and Johnson, plus 70. Okay, so this is not a popular president by any stretch of the imagination. I know that the media want to cram down on you the idea that what Joe Biden is doing is very popular, but that's because they are they're trying to pretend there is no disconnect between what Joe Biden wants to do and what he was elected to do. And that disconnect is growing broader and broader every single day. And this is giving Republicans a real opening. And if Republicans cannot ram this home by 2022, that will be a failure on their part, a massive failure on their part. You can see that Democrats are already starting to realize what a disaster some of this radicalism is. Did you know that every single like creates one additional leftist tier? That is just science.